Hi, everybody. So we're reading from Transforming Suffering into Wisdom. We're on the third intention, which is being fearless and forgiving in the midst of suffering. And last time we talked about a structure that every moment of suffering that we've ever experienced has. And that structure is a jumble of uncomfortable feelings that we feel. And they get linked or hooked to thoughts, opinions, judgments. And that the link that holds them is what I call the linchpin of I, me, and mine. So today we're going to move further from that. We're going to come back and look at that structure again and again to pull it apart. Today we're going to, and here's the picture of the structure. Today we're moving on to suffering's depravity and its nobility. What is the nature? What do we feel about suffering? So there's a quality of depravity or of pathos to suffering needlessly, to wasting our life in suffering. But to face the suffering we encounter, unflinching, to unravel its strands, and while letting its stories go, to be present with its physical sensations and feelings. This is a noble life, courageous and compassionate. What could be more courageous than to face directly the darkest moments of suffering? What could be more noble than to transform suffering into wisdom? It is a mission that is accomplished by practicing the three intentions of living in the present moment, pulling the plug on the self, and being fearless and forgiving in the midst of suffering. So I think what's relevant here is that here we are in a time of tremendous confusion and stress and suffering, this time of coronavirus, this time of a depression that we're in, economic depression, this time of political turmoil and trouble and polarization that we feel, and the lack of security that often we have felt, certainly in America, from the society and the civilization that we've created. So sometimes that suffering just seems so huge that we can't understand how to grapple with it. And if we get lost in the suffering aspect of it, it feels like such a waste. Whether we wake up in the morning feel like that way, or we go to bed that way, or we wander through our day, slog through our day, feeling that. So what we're proposing here is something that's really quite extraordinary in these moments of historic suffering in civilization. And that is that we can face them and do something about them. And if you think about that, the huge sufferings that have occurred in the past, the famines, the wars, the times of political turmoil and trouble, the diseases that have happened in the past, we think back to the figures during that time, the human beings during that time who were caring and compassionate, who were able somehow to have the presence of mind and the courage to be there with the suffering that was there. And what we're proposing here in this book, Transforming Suffering into Wisdom, and these series of practices, is that we can do that now ourselves, even though we find ourselves isolated in solitary confinement, so to speak, with our small group of either alone by ourselves or with our small group of friends. And that the practice, because we understand suffering in a deeper way, the practice begins with encountering and being willing to be there in a noble and courageous way with our own suffering. I mean, it's extraordinary what suffering does to us. It drives us to distraction. It drives us to to not be here. So the challenge is to face it and begin with these three practices inside ourselves. It's the wonderful gift that we've got from this coronavirus era, and that is that we're thrown back into ourselves rather than out into the world so much. And in ourselves, we can begin to do these practices of first just being here, just being present in the moment. We can learn that as a mindfulness meditation practice, or we can attempt it more and more in the moments of our experience around us, and whether it's in the weather, or it's in just sitting in a chair, or it's in engaging with another, being present in each moment. And then secondarily, to pull the plug on ourselves, so we're no longer just driven by our own self stories. I mean, admittedly, we have to be careful. We have to, when the disease is ever present and all around us, and we don't know where the enemy is, we need to be careful for ourselves. But once we've taken care of that and understood what the parameters are for that protection, the best thing to do is to let go of all those stories and just see if we can't, again, be here. And then the third thing, being fearless and forgiving in the midst of suffering, means that it's time to begin to look at suffering directly. To notice that it has these layers of thoughts, these layers of feelings, and this self that keeps getting involved. And to let the thoughts go, pull the plug on the self, and to begin to learn to just be here with the feelings. We'll go further so that the things that seem hard to understand, why would you want to be there with the dark feeling, for instance, we'll begin to look at more closely starting tomorrow. Thank you.